All right, so we're back again for another episode, and I never actually look before we start to tell you what episode number it is, but you should know. You should know.
7.
It's 7. See, he knows. That's why he's here. He pays attention to what's going on around us, and by he, obviously, I mean Meta Goblin. So obviously, hello, Meta Goblin, Fake QT. It's just us three today, but you know the OGs of this podcast. So how are you both doing?
I would say really good, honestly. Yeah, it's Sunday and it's podcast time, so of course it's a really good day.
Yeah, I'm good too. Yeah, just a bit ill. That's all.
I know, what a trooper. He even offered to cancel this today and we could reschedule. So Meta is a bit delicate and it's not hangover like mine. He's actually genuinely, I think he had food poisoning because he was eating cat food or something at weird hours, weird hours of the night. I don't know what he gets up to.
Sausages, I think.
Sausages? I like a
My
sausage.
girlfriend cooked them long enough.
Get rid of her, mate. Get a new one. Get one who can at least cook. Someone who at least can make you a sausage sandwich without you
She's a
being
chef
ill.
as well.
Oh, where's her restaurant? Because I ain't eating there.
I think it was actually not the sausages, but some dodgy hot dogs that have been in the fridge for too long.
Fair enough. But, well, it's good to have you both here again, obviously. And today is Warlock Day. So it's the first of the class series. So we're going to, from now until, well, for the next 9 episodes, funny enough, because that's how many classes there are, we're going to have a bit of a dive into sort of the changes between Classic and TBC, talents, new abilities, rotation, viability in raids, PvP, but it's not just going to be one of these overviews. It is going to be quite detailed. We're going to look at each spec. Maybe there's some meme specs that we know about, and that may be viable with certain gear and things like that. It's going to be quite detailed. So I'm going to try to keep it under 90 minutes. Last week I said an hour, and it was 2 hours. But if we can aim for about an hour and a half, then I think we're laughing. But for Warlocks, let's just each of us, and I'll go last, so each of us just have, a quick minute or so, just what your thoughts are on Warlocks in TBC, and, anything that really stands out. And Meta, obviously we know you're playing a Warlock on Karazhan, so we'll let you kick off.
Yeah, so a Warlock, probably they are the top tier DPS throughout the entirety of TBC, up there with a Hunter. Basically, Warlock, it's basically a close battle between Warlock and Hunter for the top DPS dog spot. When it comes to PvP, they're also incredibly strong. Got some of the most overpowered crowd control in the game, like Seduce and Fear, stupid dot damage, loads of utility, loads of great debuffs. I guess their nickname has always been like the debuff class. Like all of their debuffs are like extremely useful in a number of different situations and in raiding as well, like Curse of Elements just boosting the entire raid's DPS. And they're just a great overall, really great, strong class.
What do you think, Cutie? Ever played a Warlock?
Not really. Not even in Classic. So my knowledge when it comes to Warlock is not really that great. I know, as Meta Goblin said. When it comes to PvE, and if you're gonna play a Warlock in TBC, you're gonna have a good time because you'll most likely top the meters. And at the same time in TBC, you get Seed of Corruption. So all of a sudden you have like a huge amount of AoE damage. And they really like a Warlock when it comes to the dungeon farming as well, because you can clear stuff so fast if you play together with a prot paladin and a couple of mages.
So on that, like you say, Meta's already said top tier. We know, we've raided with Warlocks. We know how important they are in TBC, how much damage they do, how they all buff each other the more of them you've got. Do we think that's going to be a problem? Are we now going to see a massive influx of Warlocks to the point where there's more than we actually need? Or what's your thoughts on that, either of you?
Well, I think it's always inevitable, isn't it? Like the strongest class gets overplayed no matter what expansion or what patch you're playing, really. And I think like the obviously the big issue with playing like Classic WoW or Classic TBC is everyone already knows, whereas on retail there's like, I suppose everyone still kind of knows because like Method and all those big guilds will release all like those videos on what's the best tank, what's the best this, and like all the tryhard guilds I know. But I think like people just know less, like in the community, like on retail what is the best optimal class. But obviously in Classic WoW, Classic TBC, everyone just knows. So it's just pretty much unavoidable, really, that Warlock and Hunter are going to get overplayed, and then obviously Warriors and Rogues are going to get underplayed.
What do you think, Cutie? What do you think? What sort of impact's it going to have on the community? Well, not the community, but more sort of the representation of classes. You know, are we expecting that Warlock's going to be just overpopulated? Because I do.
I mean, since we're gonna have next soon, let's say it's gonna be progressive only. Then I guess you can just pay attention to how your next team is looking like. If there's a lot of Warlocks all of a sudden, yeah, it's people preparing. But like overall, yeah, Warlocks are good when it comes to raiding, but like when it comes to vanilla private service back then and compared to TBC, I think vanilla was way more min-maxed. And honestly, if it's gonna be in 2.4.3, so everything being nerfed, then it's not really gonna be difficult to do any of the raiding, I would say. And that's why I don't think everyone is gonna roll Hunter and Warlock all of a sudden, because you also have some achievements you have done in Classic on your other characters. So if you play a warrior, yeah, you might stick to that because you have Scarab Lord, or you have your rank 14 gear, or CF3. Like all that will for sure matter. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. It depends. If it's gonna be fresh, yeah, I could see a lot of people roll Warlock because they're easy to level. But if it's not gonna be fresh, I don't really know, because people are just attached to their character. Yeah.
That was actually going to be my next question. I think class distribution is it's going to come down a lot onto how it's launched. I think, yeah, like me, for example, you know, I'm rolling Prop Paladin not because they're overpowered, they are, but you know, I'm doing it for the guild. You know, we're in the process of making a raid team for TBC specifically. You know, we know exactly what classes we want, what we want on the bench. You know, so mine is a little bit different, but it would have been very easy had that not been the case, just to stick to my druid. You know, even though druid's good in TBC, I'm not the sort of person who's going to re-roll, you know, just for the sake of it, just because X class, being Warlock or Hunter at the moment, you know, is the best. But if it was fresh, that would probably make my decision a little bit more difficult, because I've always wanted a Warlock. You know, it's one of those classes where I've never really played one properly. You know, I've leveled one, you know, I've created instant 70s on servers and stuff like that, just to see what they can do, how they play style and all of that. And there's nothing wrong with them. But I think everybody in chat, everybody, you know, all three of us now, will have that one class where you wish you enjoyed it. You know, because everybody raves about it and you wish you'd enjoy it, but you just can't. And mine is Warlock. Have either of you, I know it's a little bit off topic, but either of you got a class like that? You know, you've always wanted it, but you're like, I just can't bring myself to play it.
Probably Warrior, to be honest.
What makes you but so you want a warrior but can't be bothered?
I look at it and I look at other cool PvP videos that like Swifty made and all that, and I have tried Warrior a few times and I just kind of get bored of it.
I assume Fake QT, yours is just all other 8 classes apart from Mage.
Yeah, because I mainly always play Mage, but I would probably play a Rogue instead, because Rogue and Mage in some way, because I like PvP so much, is kind of similar. Like you have stuff to share the same DR, and overall you have a lot of crowd control, which is really nice, and I like to play that way. So yeah, I would probably play as a Rogue or Hunter, to play like something completely different.
Yeah. So let's have a brief talk about, you know, what a Warlock brings to a raid. I think if we start there, if we talk about what Warlocks actually bring overall, you know, without being spec specific, then you know, we can move on from there, then start digging into each of the specs. But just like overall, what would make you, so Meta, if you was a raid leader, you know, you run in a guild, what in TBC, what makes you bring a Warlock? What's like that maybe the top 3 things that you would take a Warlock to a raid for? You can be boss specific as well. You know, you could be like specific bosses or whatever.
You got a talent tree up.
I can put it up now for you. 1 second.
Yeah, just need to hover over improved Shadow Bolt.
Yeah, so I've got the talent calculator up now. So improved Shadow Bolt. Yep. Can you read that, or do you want me to read it for you?
Yeah, you can read it if you want.
Yeah, so your Shadow Bolt critical strikes increase shadow damage dealt to the target by 4% until 4 non-periodic damage sources are applied. Effect lasts a maximum of 12 seconds. So obviously when you've got 5 points in it, so that's 20% shadow damage dealt to the target.
Yeah, so obviously when you have like 3 Warlocks in the group, which all are going to have like at least like 30% spell hit, then this like improved Shadow Bolt debuff is pretty much constantly on the raid boss. And what it does is it just synergizes. Every Warlock just like kind of buffs each other, because you're basically going to keep that improved Shadow Bolt debuff up pretty much constantly, and it just massively boosts everyone else's DPS. Well, all the other Warlocks and maybe the Shadow Priest too. So the more Warlocks you bring, the better it becomes. And then apart from that, you've also got a Curse of Elements, which actually can be boosted a little bit in the Affliction tree if people want to do that as well. And that will obviously boost the magic damage of everyone in the group by 10%. So that's like mages, elder shamans, pretty much every single class. Apart from that, you've got other debuffs like Curse of Recklessness, which will boost melee DPS of the entire group. So that's pretty win-win. It will massively boost the damage of hunters, which again, run at really big DPS. It also increases the threat that tanks generate. Then you've got things like Curse of Tongues, which is a bit of a niche one, but I'm finding it more and more I play Warlock, the more useful it becomes, because if I'm ever dealing with casters in a raid group or a dungeon group, it can like sometimes increase the cast time of mobs to about 5-6 seconds per cast. So that basically massively reduces the amount of damage that a caster mob can deal, which is found to be really, really useful. We've also got Curse of Weakness, which is great against like really hard-hitting enemies, to just like smooth out the damage on the tank a little bit. So, but obviously overall, you just got insanely good debuffs. And then apart from that, you've got a Soulstone. Soulstone's pretty useful, especially when you've got like 3 Warlocks. You can Soulstone over healers for like a bit of a. Obviously, it's there for the white protection, so you don't have to run back all the way back up to Karazhan. But it's also there for like a what would you call it? A clutch tactic to just kind of keep the raid alive if a healer quickly uses a soulstone to keep the raid going. And then apart from that, you've got summoning. Summoning people is obviously very, very useful, particularly if you like at the last boss of a certain raid, need to summon people in, or people need to go and respec for a particular reason. Like for instance, I was in a Prince fight last night on Karazhan. Obviously, it's quite a trek to get back all the way up, and a mage went back to Shatterer would have gone back to like capital city of a Classic capital city to respec into improved Scorch to basically boost my damage, because I was in Fire Warlock spec at the time, and then my DPS went up about like 200 DPS just before he went to respec. So whenever anyone needs to respec, which will probably happen quite a lot, because for instance on Gruul's fight you'll need 2 tanks, and then on the first boss of Gruul's you need like 4 tanks. So there's loads of great useful situations there where you can just summon the tanks back. We've also got Ritual of Souls, which gives everyone a health stone, which is really useful. You don't have to trade everyone the health stone, and that could be very useful. Apart from that, from the top of my head, you've got Banish, which is a really long cooldown, long CC, which can be useful too.
Yeah, an interesting one about Soulwell as well. So with for anybody who doesn't know, you can actually have that at multiple ranks. So if you've got you're going to have at least 3 Warlocks in a 25-man, you can technically hold 3 health stones, all at different ranks. So, and you can have a macro, which basically will just use one after the other when you need them, which is, I don't think people utilise enough, to be fair, but that requires a bit of communication between your Warlocks, because obviously they'll need to spec specifically for what rank health stone that they're going to make. In chat, someone mentioned Seed of Corruption. I mean, we all know how overpowered Seed of Corruption is. It's just incredible AoE. Is there any bosses, so like QT, is there any bosses where you would almost just not want to raid without a Warlock? Is there? So we've spoke about what they bring. Meta spoke about what they bring. I might add a couple of points in a minute, but is there any bosses where you're probably going to struggle without one or 2?
I would say Aaron in Karazhan, because he summons water elementals in one of the phases, and if you have Banish, you can simply make that phase not really that important because, yeah, you won't have to deal with them. And like when it comes to why I like Warlocks in TBC, yeah, it was because of Vanish, Soulstone, and of course Summon. But yeah, definitely Aaron. That's like the only fight I can really think about right now. But that's also because I haven't played a Warlock myself. I just remember we always bring Warlocks, 2, even 3 sometimes when it comes to Aaron.
How big was your damage on Illhoof meta?
I've not actually done Illhoof yet. The raid I ran with 2 days ago, didn't do it.
Oh, right, okay.
Don't know why.
That's another fight where without a Warlock, it's not impossible, but it makes it more difficult because you just haven't got that ridiculously big AoE taking all the imps down.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, why you take them? If we was to list reasons, like number 1, damage. Obviously, their damage is immense. Number 2, we're sort of saying utility. They bring more to the raid than just damage and just debuffs. The summon is a massive time saver. Soulstone, massive time saver. Time saver if you're using it for white protection. Health stones at varying ranks. So less requirement on potions, and just people should be using them. The downside is, I don't know if you guys find the same thing, but not many people use health stones. They'll click the well and take it and then die, and their health stone's not even been used.
Yeah. That's why I made that macro that you talked about earlier, and I keybind it.
Yeah, it's just crazy how people nowadays, like when you're raiding, why you would die when you've got a way not to die, and it costs you no gold or anything. It's never really made sense to me. A bit like Lightwell for priests.
Yeah.
But let's have a look at more. So let's go over new spells. So things that have been added, and just have a quick discussion about each of the abilities and like sort of their usefulness. We're going to look at the new abilities that you get from talent. So I'm not going to talk about like Shadow Fury, Fell Guard, Unstable Affliction, anything like that. Obviously, we're talking about the ones that you go to your trainer and you learn. So I think, firstly, Fell Armor. What's your thoughts on Fell Armor meta? I mean, I'm assuming you've got it on all the time.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's really useful, obviously, because it gives you just 130 spell power, and then if you talent it, you can get massively increased health generation on Drain Life. Actually, your talent's only a slight increase, but when you have Fell Armor on it, you do notice a difference of Drain Life, which can be very useful if you're doing like a Drain Tank build while leveling up.
Yeah. Is there any situations where you use any other armor, or is it just always Fell Armor, don't even have the others on the bar?
I honestly haven't discovered one yet. I'm pretty much always just using Fell Armor.
Yeah, I've never seen anyone use anything other than Fell Armor. I just wondered if you knew any sort of niche occasions that you might need something else.
I mean, maybe if you're face tanking something, but I can't see when you would actually have to face tank something.
Yeah. Have you got any comments on Fell Armor QE? I mean, I can obviously.
No, it's definitely not.
It's fairly standard, yeah. Like Matt has already said, the fact that it increases the amount of health generated. So for an SLSL build, obviously, which we will get to soon, it's pretty sick. So I think probably the biggest addition, which again may go sort of unnoticed, is Soul Shatter. So Soul Shatter reduces threat by 50%. To all enemies, so yeah, it's not like a single target threat dump, it's just everything that you're in combat with. Do you find that useful?
Yeah. It's extremely high range as well. Well, put it this way, when I was doing Prince the other night, I was pulling aggro because the tank was terrible and he wasn't a prop pally. So basically every time I pulled aggro, I would just get one-shotted, and I didn't have enough soul shards for Soul Shatter, so I definitely needed to be using Soul Shatter quite a lot, really. It's extremely useful, especially with that 50-yard range, because you don't have to be anywhere near the boss really to even use it. Yeah,
and I think that's sort of what you're going to be controlled by. On the basis, like I know you're a fire warlock, but let's say you were Shadow, spamming Shadow Bolt. The only way you can really control the outcome of a fight is by managing your threat. There's nothing else. You're spamming one button. So actually looking at the threat meter is probably far more important than anything else that's going on other than boss mechanics, obviously. But I think Soul Shatter. What's the cooldown on Soul Shatter? Is it 5 minutes?
It's 2
minutes.
5 minutes.
2 minutes, right? Or is it 5?
Yeah, 5 minutes. It's quite a hefty cooldown, to be honest. You probably only use it once in a fight. Which is why you may want to bring a fret trinket like Hypnotist Watch or the is it Time Lapse Shard from Keepers of Time? Yeah.
Would obviously that would now you'd be sacrificing quite a lot of damage from a potential DPS trinket. But is it? Do you find yourself having to stand there a lot and not cast? I mean, speaking purely from a boomkin perspective, I sometimes stand like maybe 10-15% of a fight doing nothing.
The trick really is because you're going to have to life tap anyway, which obviously doesn't generate anywhere near as much fret as doing damage to the boss. When you're just going high in fret, I mean, it's best to just sit there and life tap, honestly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the fret will drop.
Can you use this spell like together when you're Seed of Corruption? So if you're doing dungeon farming, for example, if you had to level to 70, would this be good to like use as well to keep your threat low, or do you ever use it together with Seed of Corruption?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. It will happen inevitably. If you're tanking with if you're playing, in a group of a terrible tank like, Feral Druid or Prop Warrior, you're gonna have to Soul Shatter pretty much quite often. If you're gonna deep dig some seeds with that kind of tank, then it's always keep Soul Shatter ready.
Yeah, and I think it almost feels like it should have been in Classic, because like Warlocks, well, once you start getting your like all your hit gear and the Spellvine set, whatever it's called, I don't know, you'll know better than me when it comes to Classic clothes. But you do start pumping as a Warlock even in Classic to the point where you're not really reaching your full potential just because you're threat capped basically, because you've not really got any threat reducing talents or anything, I believe, either. Bloodvine, that's the one. Thanks, Arcax.
I think there's one of a destruction tree, but it's pretty crap. I think it's only at 10%. Yeah, 10% destructive reach. Is that in Classic?
Which one? Where am I looking on the tree?
It's like in the middle.
Oh yeah. I see. Increase the range of destruction and threat caused. I have a feeling it doesn't reduce threat in Classic, but chat can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it is just reach. But yeah, as I say, someone in the chat can either confirm or deny. I mean, outside of that, so destruction-wise, obviously you've already spoke about being a fire warlock, so you get incinerate. I mean, is there? I assume that's basically your main spell as a fire warlock.
Yeah, well, it's honestly more the filler spell. The rotation is to use immolate, then incinerate, and then use conflagrate, like a 1 second duration left on immolate, and you refresh immolate, ideally snapshotting it with DPS trinkets and procs from your items or anything like that, and then just rinse and repeat that rotation. It's pretty good rotation, to be honest. It's much better than Shadow Warlock rotation, and then you may use Shadow Burn while you're moving and things like that.
Yeah, makes sense. And Shadow Burn, it's quite hard as well, don't it?
Yeah, it's pretty hefty. Obviously it consumes a soul shard, only disadvantage.
Yeah, so I mean, we've not really spoke about that. So soul shard wise, that is one thing that puts me off. I hate farming. I'd rather, I'd like to just stand in a city and then wait till it's raid time, and then that's it. I don't really like going out and doing anything because I'm lazy. Is it quite irritating, like especially like having your bag space dominated by soul shards as well, and the time it takes to get them?
Yeah, it's not really, because what I do is I just remember to do it in dungeons. And then you can, it's only like the first quarter of a dungeon. If you just remember to soul shard the first quarter of a dungeon, you'd be stacked out of like 40 soul shards, and then you're ready to go, really. And I'm doing the dungeons anyway because I need to do them. But but the bag space, yeah, that is kind of a pain in the backside. But obviously you get soul bags, which kind of mitigates the issue a little bit.
Yeah. Have you ever leveled a warlock at all, Fake QT, or even like low levels of you?
Yeah, I have one. I have leveled to 39 for Twinking, but I got it to 39 and then bought all the gear, and then I didn't really play it. I guess it could be fun, but yeah, the soul shard part has been the thing turning me off as well.
Yeah, and that's a big one for me. That's really what what I don't particularly like. And someone's asked in chat, are you actually trying to convince people to play Fire Spec in TBC? No, not at all. Fire Spec in practically no gear, freshly dinged 70, it yields good results. But I mean, ultimately, from my experience and research, and all the playing on private servers, Affliction's actually probably the strongest spec early on with no gear, but we'll get into that when we start looking at the talents. Which I reckon it's probably time for, because the only other abilities we haven't covered are in the talent trees. So if we now start digging into each of the talent trees, and we'll talk about them from a PvE, PvP perspective. So obviously we'll start with Affliction. Have you played Affliction, Meta? Have you?
Yeah, I got terribly bored of it. But it is a really useful spec because it provides more support than the other specs. Because especially as you're going to off-spec into improved imp, and you're going to sit in the tank group and provide the tank with blood pact and fire shield and all those useful things.
Yeah, but then I suppose you're missing out on the good buffs from people you actually want to be in a group with. I assume, like you'd want to be with a shaman or a boom. Well, actually, a boom is not probably worth it. The crit for Affliction, but that'd probably still help.
Yeah, a tiny bit, but like you don't. Pretty sure dots don't crit. So
no, they don't. I don't think they started crit until Wrath. I believe Wrath is when dots could tick, and I think it was actually a talent that enabled them to crit, if I remember rightly.
Yeah,
it was like that, but at least for failed druids. So it could have been for warlocks too.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure it was. But anyway, we always seem to somehow talk about Wrath, no matter what we're talking about. I think we all secretly want Wrath more than TBC. So just kick off, Meta, because I want to open the door because it's really hot in here. Just kick off with Affliction overall, what you would use it for. It's PvE, PvP viability, and obviously QT. Just chime in with anything you need. Anything you think's maybe missed or your experience of Affliction. But we really want to we can get in the nitty gritty of the talents as well. But if we just give it a little bit of an overview first. And then, there's some certain talents that I certainly want to pick out anyway and discuss. So, but as I say, Matt, if I let you kick off while I open the door, because I'm sweating.
Well, the main reason why people think Affliction has a place in raiding is because a lot of people on private servers, when a private server launches, you're obviously not sat there decked out in tier 3 gear. And when you get to level 70, you're going to be in really terrible gear and not have a lot of hit rating, like spell hit rating. And obviously they have that talent called Suppression, which increases the hit chance of your Affliction spell, so it's quite easy to get the hit cap in Affliction spec rather than Destruction spec. But I don't think that will be such an issue if people are going to be decked out in tier 3 gear. So Affliction, I think, will overall have less value in Classic TBC, but it is still basically considered a really strong supporting DPS spec. So it buffs the DPS of everyone else in the group. A talent called Malediction, which it basically buffs Curse of Elements by an additional 3% when you're maxing out. You've also got the debuff Shadowy Embrace, which reduces the amount of physical damage that the boss deals, which can be a little bit useful, smoothing out damage on the tanks. And then, like I said before, you can get improved imp for buffing the tank and things like that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it seems like Shadow Embrace also, if you spam Seed of Corruption, it reduced the damage taken, as you said, or the damage dealt, the melee damage. So that's really good actually when it comes to Affliction, I would say.
Yeah, I think Seed of Corruption does do more damage when you deep spec into Affliction.
Yeah, but that even in a dungeon or in a heroic, I always use Prop Paladin as an example because Prop Paladin Warlock together is insane. But yeah, reducing physical damage, if you pull a pack of 5 mobs, reducing all their damage by 5% when you use a Seed of Corruptions, actually, it's quite insane. So you're bringing massive damage, literally bursting mobs down quicker than anybody else. And trust me, to everybody in chat, everybody watching back on YouTube, Warlocks will dominate damage in dungeons. Doesn't matter what class you are, you will not beat them on AoE packs. Anyway, no chance. Put it in perspective, in sort of pre-BIS gear, you're going to have, so decent AoE. Let's say mages. Mages might be pushing let's say 2k on a big AoE pack, and then you'll have a Warlock doing 5-6k. It's mad. The difference is mad. It's like, and it's massive. But that I've never thought about that. That's interesting. As I say, you know, I'm not going to sit here and claim to be a Warlock expert. I've done a lot of research. I've, you know, played about with them, but I've never actually thought about how big that 5% damage reduction is in any situation, not just a dungeon, but in a raid as well. You know, if you've got a really hard hitting boss like Gruul, and you haven't got an Affliction Warlock in the group, that's, I mean, can you get that? Does it stack with anything else? Is there any other physical damage reduction, you know, from other classes that you would take in place of this?
Well, I mean, it'll probably stack with Curse of Weakness. Obviously, it's not a direct stack. And obviously, it's going to stack with a warrior's armor and his block and everything like that.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about debuffs. I just know it will stack with a tank's buffs, like inspiration and things like that, like the priest provides for when they heal.
So would you,
damage reduction?
Obviously, based on that 5% damage reduction, and obviously, you know, improve, so malediction, yeah, which increases the bonus effect of Curse of Shadows and Curse of Elements by 3%, you know, like that, buffing your other warlocks and your Shadow Priest and stuff like that, and, you know, casters by another 3%. Would you say that having at least one Affliction Warlock in a raid is almost essential?
I don't know. I think people, it's like, I think it's more preference. I've seen a lot of people who just deck out Destruction Warlocks because obviously they do such ridiculous damage. But yeah, some people like to prefer bringing on Affliction Warlock. But again,
what would you do?
Well, in Classic TBC, I probably wouldn't, because everyone's going to be decked out in spell hit gear. That Affliction isn't absolutely essential, because I think people aren't going to have issues like with their spells missing the boss if they have over spell hit from tier 3 and various other items.
So your gut feeling would be Destruction is just going to be viable from the word go. So I suppose that would change a little bit like what we was talking about earlier, depending on how it's launched. So yeah, would you expect to see more Affliction Warlocks if it was a fresh launch? Yeah,
as a fresh server, I think more people would want to go Affliction because they just get sick of their spells missing, or get sick of spamming spell hit gear.
Yeah, and there's quite a severe lack of spell hit gear early in TBC as well, to be fair.
Yeah.
Even the ones that, like, if you think about the neck from... Is it not Black Art the Inciter? The one in Shadow Labs, there's a really good casting neck.
Shadow Labs, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like crit and hit, isn't it, if I remember rightly. So now you've got a sort of a wasted stat.
Yeah, I think it only provides like 8 spell hit. A lot of the pieces are really small. Even like Continuum Blade only provides 8 spell hit on an entire weapon.
Yeah, it is incredible. But the itemization, and it also is going to depend on what itemization patch we go into. If it's 2.0, it's going to be even worse. Where at least by 2.4.3, you know, I hope for a 2.4.3 itemization personally. Did you cover anything like about the Dark Pact in Affliction? Because I know you recently done a video, didn't you, Matt, on the infinite mana Warlock build? Yeah,
so that will become useful mostly for solo gold farming or leveling, really. You're not really going to see it that much in a raiding environment, because most people cut off speccing into Affliction at about that point. Like for other like PvP builds and things like that. So you don't really see Dark Pact that much apart from leveling, really.
Is it, but in a raiding environment, let's say you did go deep Affliction, so, you know, all the way down to Unstable Affliction, you've got Dark Pact. Is it beneficial to use? You know, because as Affliction, I'm assuming, you know, you're going to be using an Imp, so your Imp having mana to be able to use Firebolt, or do you even not have that? Do you just have it just sat phased and it not even cast? You know.
Well, the issue is obviously the Imp provides roughly about an extra 100 DPS. And if you drain all his mana, that DPS is all gone. And Dark Pact doesn't scale with spell power. It does on private servers, but I think private servers are got it wrong, according to someone I talked to recently. Whereas Life Tap does scale with your spell damage and your shadow spell damage. So a lot of the time it is just better to just Life Tap.
Yeah, but I suppose then as well, if you are using an Imp, because I have, I have heard from very, very experienced warlocks where they do just keep it phased all the time, just because of how easy it dies. Even though it's ranged.
Yeah, there's that as well. Yeah, so a lot of fights it will just die. It's really annoying.
Yeah, which even
Fireball is like really short. I think it's compared to Warlock abilities, it's really crap range. I think it's only like, I don't know what it is. I think it's like between 20 and 30 yards. It's much worse than our range on our abilities.
Yeah, and I suppose really the reason you're there, other than buffing the raid with curses, etc., is providing that extra stamina for the tank. So if your imp dies, I'm not going to say your tank's gonna die because you've lost your imp, but it's gonna be detrimental to the tank at least.
Yeah, fireball. By the way, is 30 yards range.
Right, so easier to control than obviously if you had a sucker bus or something like that out. But so where do you see Affliction, like Fake QT? If you was to look at the whole Affliction build, do you see it as where would you rank it? From a PvE perspective, good early on fresh servers. Maybe as its place, just having one in a raid. Like, is it more of a PvP spec? Like, what's your views on it as a spec overall?
Affliction is PvP mainly, or it is good for PvE as well, yeah, early on. But you will swap at some point, yeah, that's for sure. And I think even with a Classic TBC where you progress, people would actually still play Affliction. Because, yeah, you might think next gear and stuff like that will provide a lot of hit. And it did in Classic, but if you look into the gear, I tried to bring over the best gear you could get as a mage from Classic into TBC, and I still liked a ton of hit. So I don't know, it depends. Like, you have to go for squares as well then if you want the huge hit trinket, yeah. But for PvP, yeah, most people are playing Affliction, and I think early on, even in Classic TBC, people would actually play the spec as well.
Well, this is a very, there's no evidence for what I'm about to say. It is purely just my opinion. I think you'll see a lot of warlocks early on, even with full Nax gear, as Affliction. And the reason I say that is because they've been spamming Shadow Bolt for the entirety of Classic, even though spamming Shadow Bolt in TBC is going to yield better results. They might just want a change. The debuff limit skyrocketing. So they can actually use dots now. I would argue it's a more engaging rotation. It's not a rotation, is it? That's the thing. It's a priority system. So it's managing your dots, keeping everything rolling, and then using filler spells. But I think it's probably got a higher skill cap, and I reckon if you mastered it and you was really good, and I think particularly on multiple targets. So a fight, let's use like hiking Mulgar. So yeah, the first boss in Gruul's Lair. There's multiple targets there that you can be rolling dots on. I would say it's going to be strong. It might, even though you should be single targeting a skull, don't get me wrong, but we don't know how easy this content's going to be. It could just be bloody cleaving mobs down, in which case Affliction may even pull ahead of Destruction. Again, I've got no logs or evidence to back that up, but it's just my gut feeling.
Yeah, I thought the same when I started playing this Warlock. I did actually start out playing Affliction, and honestly I just found the rotation really annoying. So I re-rolled to something a bit more simple. Because it is
annoying,
kind of like
as in
really
difficult?
It's not difficult, it's just pain in the backside, just keeping your dots up all the time.
Yeah, so you prefer just, like probably doing more damage as the spec you are now as a Firelock, and obviously you're inevitably going to be a Shadowlock at some point. But you find it more rewarding just to basically do more damage for less effort.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It doesn't really feel like Affliction doesn't really feel like more effort though. It just feels like you just have to track more things, and honestly, it just becomes a bit like frustrating.
So how do you feel, Fake QT, on rotation difficulty? As in, so just to put a bit of context behind that, I hate easy classes. So it's probably a reason why I couldn't play a Warlock, because I don't, when you're a Shadow Spec Warlock, which the vast majority will be, as in just spamming Shadow Bolt, and maybe Curse of Doom every minute, that I'd be bored to tears. You know, I've always gone for like the difficult to master classes, like Feral DPS, like Windwalker Monk during MOP. You know, these where it's high risk but high reward. You know, you do one thing wrong in your rotation and you are not pulling back, and that's how Feral DPS is in Classic. You misclick and do a wrong power shift, you just watch your numbers plummet. Like, how do you feel playing a mage spamming Frostbolt?
That's why I really don't raid in Classic right now. But if I was going to play a Warlock in TBC, and I had been raiding like as a Destro in Vanilla or Classic, sorry, then I would actually love to play Affliction, because you know later on in TBC, if you're going to keep maining this character, you have to play Destruction at some point. So would you rather play Destruction all the way in TBC, or would you actually be able and like to play Affliction for maybe the first tire content? I would definitely play Affliction then, because I know in SSC, TK, Black Temple, Sunwell, Suleiman, I all of a sudden have to play Destruction for maybe a year. So for me, yeah, if I don't like spamming one buttons, and that's why I'm looking forward a little bit to TBC, where mages actually get, you know, to play 3 different specs. So when it comes to Warlock, yeah, I would definitely love to play Affliction, and then I would probably be very bored when you had to play Destruction.
Yeah, well, it's like the sort of talent that I've got highlighted on the screen at the moment. So Nightfall gives you corruption and drain life spells. You know, 2% chance to cause you to enter a shadow trance state, basically giving you, you know, an instant cast shadow bolt. And I like those sort of abilities. I like reacting to things on any class that I play. You know, and there's not that much of it in TBC. But I think, yeah, Affliction is the sort of... I'd really struggle playing Destruction. I out of all 3 of these trees, the only one that excites me really is Affliction. And I think things like that, yeah, where you've got to react, and you know, you need really good weak auras set up, tracking these procs, tracking your trinkets for snapshotting and things like that. You know, I just think it adds engagement. Because let's face it, the raid bosses are not that difficult, are they? And like you said earlier, Meta, we know everything. We know everything what to expect. There's already raid guides out for every boss in TBC. We're not like going in there and learning it fresh. So I think keeping the actual gameplay from a character perspective, it's important. Well, it's important for me, maybe not for others. But okay, I think we've summed it up well as in Affliction, and I don't think we've really missed a great deal. Obviously, the important things are the fact that you get 10% spell hit from the Affliction tree. So early on, you can get hit capped a lot easier as Affliction. You know, it's got lots of dots. You know, improving Curse of Elements and Curse of Shadows. You know, buffing your casters even more. Quite high survivability with things like Siphon Life. So, you know, it's a dot that you're going to keep up, but also healing you. So you require less healers, putting less, you know, pressure on the healers in your group. And obviously, yeah, getting that improved imp. So that's the only thing that... I love Affliction, like I've just said. Out of all 3, it's the only tree that excites me. What don't excite me is I am a DPS whore, and I want to be in the group that's going to make me do the most damage. And obviously, that's not going to be where you are. You're not going to be there. You're not going to be in that group that gives you the spell power totems and gives you, you know, the things that you want, because you're going to be stuck in a tank group. Only downside for me. What about... Have you played about Demonology, Matter?
Well, I know that if you're extremely skilled at pet management, that Felguard Demonology spec is actually pretty strong in raiding. But it's a bit of a pain in the backside because you have to manage the demon very well. You have to pull him in and out of certain fights so he doesn't die too easily.
I hear, and again, just from research, not personal experience, that actually when you can get the Felguard, it's the best leveling spec.
Yeah, it is pretty strong because of that cleave. You can do a lot of AoE cleave, pressure,
and soul link as well.
Quest as well, right? With the spec.
Sorry, QT, you can do what?
I mean, you could probably do a lot of solo elite quests if you play at the spec. I could see, like if you have a really strong pet, just like a hunter. If you're a BM, like you have a huge advantage, I guess, to actually solo stuff.
Yeah, I mean the Felguard's a bit of a beast. And there's actually a trinket you can get, which makes it even more of a beast, but it's from Blackwing Lair, strangely enough. It's the Dark Book, isn't it? The Warlock Dark Book.
Yeah, buffs a Felguard as well.
So it might be something, if you're playing a Warlock now in Classic and you haven't got it already because you're like, well, what do I want that for? You might actually find a use for it in TBC. Because I think you will see a lot of people leveling as Demonology. I probably would level as Demonology purely from a speed perspective. Yeah, I just think that they're tanky as shit. Felguard does loads of damage. They've got some good talents. But
do you think people will big level as a demo? Because if it's gonna be spell cleave mainly, wouldn't people just stay, destruction or swap to affliction then?
Spell cleaving through dungeons. Yeah, I'm definitely. Yeah, but I think solo leveling, and also again, you've got to think about these people that have been playing Warlock all the way through Classic. Spamming Shadow Bolt. All of a sudden, they get this new beefy pet that they can more or less like solo people in duels just with their pet. Yeah, I think. During pre-patch, you'll see a lot of Demonology Warlocks, and just because of the Felguard, that's it. And maybe they've already got the book from Blackwing Lair, and they want to try it out. I mean, I think it's they've done Warlocks really well in TBC because they've got 3 very different specs. Like if you were to compare it to a mage, fire, arcane, and frost are different, but ultimately. As fire, you're going to be spamming fireball. As frost, you'll be spamming frostbolt. As arcane, you'll be spamming arcane blast into your room. There's still quite a lot of spam in one button, no matter what spec you are. I know there is a bit more to it than that. I'm just oversimplifying it. But whereas the 3 specs across Warlocks, destruction is that one button spam. Demonology is that sort of tanky but high pet management. And then Affliction is dots. They're all like completely different playstyles, which I personally find quite interesting. But Demonology, so do we think, so you say with good pet management, it can be viable in PvE. Would you expect in Classic TBC to see many people playing Demonology? Like, what does it bring to a raid? Even if it was the top damage out of the 3, which it's not, obviously we're not going to pretend that it is. But what does it actually bring the group?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be one of definitely the most rare spec out there. Because again, I don't think it provides that much support for the rest of the raid either.
Yeah. No, it's mainly only for you and your pet, yeah. So it's not going to buff anyone in the raid.
Yeah, there's not a great deal that I've seen that it would bring. I just wondered if there's anything that I might have missed. But I think for a leveling spec or a solo farming spec, I think that's probably where it's best suited. Maybe if your Warlock's your ult that you go around farming primals on or something like that, then Demonology could possibly be, the spec that you go. But what about PvP? So obviously we know sort of SL, and by SL we mean Siphon Life, down to Siphon Life in the Affliction tree, and then down to Soul Link in the Demonology tree. Even though you're not going all the way down to the Felguard, I mean, you can almost class that as a Demonology spec, couldn't you? You're going all the way down to Soul Link, you're only missing a few more points. I mean, what do we think we're going to see there from a PvP perspective? And Cutie, I'll let you kick off because obviously you do a lot of PvP.
You mean regarding the spec or what? Because most people will like a mix, so half demo and then like half affliction, and it's like so strong when it comes to arena. If you play with like a rested druid or something like that, you can definitely climb the rating ladder really easy. You can even play with like a mage as well or a shadow priest, and you're so tanky when you play as SSL. So definitely something to look forward to if you're going to PvP in arena, because you can tank and you can definitely play as 2 DPS because even without a healer you can survive for a long time, and that's really one of the benefits. So you can survive the huge burst and then win the match after when you set up a huge CC.
So it is just the tankiness that we're saying is the main thing there. Obviously, are you sacrificing damage though? Are you, is your damage output still very good, or is it just you sort of whittle the things down, the other team down, but at the cost of damage, you're just gaining loads and loads of survivability. You know, would a full affliction warlock do more damage?
I think it's important you have the survivability and the opportunity to always, have a cooldown in case your healer is sitting in a full, maybe like 10-15 seconds CC. And like if you're playing with a double deeps, if you can't survive the burst, you're not gonna do any damage anyway. So I think it's really important that you have to have a spec where you're actually able to rotate some stuff and help your team.
Have you tried SLSL meta on yours? I mean, if you haven't, you probably should.
I haven't tried it all the way down to Soul Link. So I prefer to go deeper into Affliction when I'm leveling.
Have you got any plans to do any PvP on a Warlock, or are you mainly focusing on PvE?
Yeah, possibly. Not just yet though.
Well, what would you PvP as? You know, would you go SLSL or would you try deep Destro, or like what would your plan be?
I mean, I'd always try like the stronger spec and learn as much as I can in the stronger spec, and then maybe start experimenting.
Yeah. All right, so we've done Affliction, we've done Demonology. You know, we've sort of agreed Demonology is, you'll go quite deep into it for PvP. PvE, you might see the odd one, but it is going to be a very, I'm not going to say meme spec, but a bit more of a niche spec that is probably, if you had a Demonology Warlock applied to your guild and you had a Destro Warlock and it was both in equal gear, you'd probably take the Destro Warlock, in my opinion. I would. Just because I'd expect the Demonology Warlock to be shit, but, they could very well prove you wrong. So what about Destro? So this is going to be the main talent tree that we see people going deep into for most of the expansion. Like, what are the key talents that stick out for you here? And Meta, I'm sorry, I know I keep picking on you, but you are at least playing a Warlock.
Obviously, it's mainly Ruin, the main talent that people get spec and destruction for, because it basically increases your critical strike damage bonus by 100%. So I think normal crits for most classes do 150% of normal damage, and then Warlocks are doing 250% of the initial damage, so that can be pretty ridiculous. You're going to get Shadow Bolts and Incinerates like critting over like 5k, maybe even higher. But that's probably the key talent. I mean, can't really, obviously all the other talents are mainly, honestly, only providing a boost to your fire damage rather than the shadow damage of Shadow Bolt, which is why people off-spec into Demonology to get Demonic Sacrifice for Sacrifice on the Succubus, which increases your shadow damage by 15%, and then when that stacks with Shadow Priest, that's a total of 30%, so you just got an extra 30% flat damage pretty much constantly, which is like ridiculously strong.
Is there any specific talents you pick up on the way down in demo? So obviously, yeah, you go down to Ruin, like you say, any further down than that you go, really. I mean, Shadow and Flame sounds nice, an additional 20% of your bonus spell damage, but I suppose that of your bonus spell damage, versus a flat 15% shadow damage, I assume there's no competition.
Obviously, you get improved Shadow Bolt like we talked about before. Going to get Bane for the just reduced cast time, which means flat damage increase because you're just going to be casting more Shadow Bolts, which obviously scales with your haste as well. Then you have Devastation, slight increase for hit, but you're mainly just getting it for Ruin. Destructive Reach is a little bit of extra range, which obviously is always very useful. Then you probably get Intensity, just for the off chance that you do get affected by damage, you can just, carry on casting more easily. And then, yeah, and that's it. Like, you pretty much go straight back into Demonology just to get Demonic Sacrifice. It's weird how, like, the majority of the talents in the optimal DPS spec for a Warlock you do not actually benefit from, because a lot of them are actually totally useless. Because, like, for instance, all the talents that increase your pet's effectiveness you're not actually using because you have it sacrificed for the whole time.
Yeah, the only one worth note. I mean, do you get Shadow Burn? Do you use Shadow Burn as Shadow?
Right, yeah. I thought you meant Shadow Fury then. I was getting confused. So I think a lot of Warlocks actually opt out of it because there's another talent that they prefer to pick up. But personally, I like it because I'm still doing dungeons and things, so it still comes in very useful to me. because I don't burn through all my soul shards in dungeons, obviously, because I just use it as an executability, and it does increase your DPS, and it goes really well with the Fire Warlock rotation, because you can cast Immolate, Incinerate, Conflag into Shadowburn. So that's 4 different spells which are doing that really instantaneous, like really fast damage. It's really good for like killing ads. You know, for instance, on the third boss of Shadow Labs, I normally just when he summons over his Void Walkers, you got to kill him, otherwise the boss heals. I just switch to the Void Walker, use Immolate, Incinerate, Conflag, and Shadowburn. It would just die, even if I'm the only one DPSing it. So yeah, I think you mainly get Shadowburn for that if you need that really instantaneous short burst damage.
Yeah, I'm just sort of just making a dummy spec here, because someone's saying you can get both. So I'm just sort of not doing anything of any great value. Don't say, you know, this is not the spec that you would go. But I'm just looking at how you would distribute the points roughly, because like Never Protection, for example, is really nice. Again, for fights like Ilhoof. You know, so when you're being hit by a Shadow or Fire spell, which obviously is what the imps are doing, you have 30% chance to become immune. You know, the top warlocks, you know, are going to be smashing the passes on that. Will probably have Never Protection. But yeah, you do actually go. I'm assuming is this what it would look like roughly for you, meta? As in, would you literally only go down to Demonic Sacrifice, so you do get Shadow and Flame and a 15%, even though some of these are useless.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the main Shadow Bolt spec that you've got on screen.
Yeah, it seems like you're wasting a lot of points. You know, as in like, you're not going to be using Immolate, you're not going to be using Conflagrate, you're not going to be using... I mean,
you will use Immolate, actually. Well, you will use Immolate if you've got crap gear, so it depends on how good Classic TBC gear is going to be. Honestly, even in Classic WoW gear, I think Immolate will probably do more damage. So a lot of... Well, I think you need a certain amount of crit and a certain amount of spell damage for Shadow Bolt spamming to take over any other kind of rotation. Mm-hmm. But when you're starting out, I know that Immolate, it does actually provide more damage than Shadow Bolt, particularly with that talent. And if you calculate the dot in Immolate as well, it's actually better to use Immolate on cooldown as well. Not on cooldown, sorry, just to keep the dot maintained and then spam Shadow Bolt. But I think eventually when you get enough spell power, Shadow Bolt just becomes the go-to way for the rotation.
Yeah, makes sense. So obviously we know how strong Destruction is in PvE, and we've had a bit of a dive into some of the important talents, like Ruin, Demonic Sacrifice. They're the main things you're bothered about. But yeah, you can get Shadow and Flame as well, so 20% additional bonus spell damage. I don't know whether there is any use of going further down. Some specs may appear in a Classic TBC, like going down to Soul Link, for example, but then losing that spell damage from Shadow Bolt. Again, it's not going to be an optimal PvE spec, but I think there's just so much you can play with the Warlock talents. That's the one thing I like about the class is you can really make some niche specs for niche circumstances. What about, is there much PvP viability in Destro Fake QT?
Guess there could be, yeah. Like even with Shadow Fury, it seems so good that you all of a sudden get that stun. But then again, like if you're gonna play as a Destro, you would probably play 2 DPS, and then if you all of a sudden have to stun, you might overlap the DR, for example, if you play with a rogue. So I don't really know if Destro is really that great when it comes to like full Destro, if it's really that great in PvP, because you will get stopped a lot of times, and like if people kick you and CC you and stun you to death, and you have no survivability, then I don't really see the use for this spec, because then you won't be bursting anyway the huge crits.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think world PvP Destro is probably very good. Yeah.
Well, it could be really fun if you're, but like when it comes to arenas, people know what they have to do, and they'll try to prevent you from either playing a character or they're gonna kill you. So yeah, in PGs, yeah, definitely world PvP, yeah, could work as well when you are not overlapping stuff, because you're gonna play by yourself most likely in world PvP. But yeah, else I would rather the fact that you can run around, dot up, and then you can get stunned, but while you're stunned, you actually still do damage, right? That's the really good thing about playing Affliction, for example, and Demo.
Yeah. Well, I've just put on the standard. So from one of the guys in chat, the standard sort of Destro build that you'll see commonly used. So, if you want to note that down or whatever, feel free for you Warlocks that are watching. But yeah, they're overpowered. We know that. Look, as I say, we wanted to keep this to about an hour and a half, so we've still got a little bit of time. And the main thing I want to get on, we was going to talk about rotations. I've got rotations down to talk about, but I think we can sum that up so quickly that it's probably not really much of a point. I think it'd be better to keep this as sort of snappy as possible, because Affliction, you've got dot management. Ultimately you're keeping your dots up. Demonology, not really going to see to have much of a rotation, and then Destruction, you're going to be keeping Curse of Doom up and spamming Shadow Bolt the vast majority of the time. So I feel that that's probably a waste of time. So what I'd rather talk about is what do we want? What would a Warlock want in Classic now, that's going to be useful in TBC, and what are the things that they should be gunning for really, really early? So if I had Meta, like you, if I hand over to you while I now shut the door because it's getting cold in here, and just what are those big items, big wins that you're wanting to get really quick on a Warlock, and then obviously Fake QT chime in as well.
I guess like the one we talked about earlier would be the Black Book. That's obviously very, very useful. And then apart from that, all I can really think about is spell power trinkets, because spell power trinkets, there's some of them in TBC, but you will have to farm a lot of rep to get the main one, which is the Scryer's Blood Gem. That takes a while to get, so you may want to get some pretty decent spell power trinkets from Classic TBC, because it might last you a while. And apart from that, you've got the Abyssal or Abyss Shard, which gives you a free Voidwalker summon, which can be pretty useful. You can just get that at level 55 from the Sunken Temple class quests. That's all I can think of from top of my head, but I'm pretty sure there is some tier bonuses that are quite useful. Can't remember off the top of my head all the tier sets from Classic WoW, but there's one that increases your drain life effectiveness by another, I think it's 10% or 20%, which obviously is going to stack with Fell Armor to a total of 40% odd. And there's a few other talents that obviously increase the effectiveness of drain life, which can be really useful while leveling up and obviously in PvP.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. If you look at this set in phase 6, if you have cleared nags, you will get the 4 set bonus, and that increase your damage of corruption. So I guess if we bring that 4 set bonus at 70, that 12% extra damage is actually going to be pretty huge, I would say, if you play as Affliction. And as you mentioned, the Trinkets, for example, from Zephyrian, it gives you a flat spell damage boost. And there is really no really good Trinkets in TBC early on that gives you a good amount of flat spell damage and a use effect at the same time. And if you clear Nefarian right now in Classic, you should definitely try to get the tier, because that gives you a lot of hit as well and a flat spell damage boost. So those two, for Zephyrian Trinket and Nefarian Trinket, you should go and get those, because if you're gonna need a lot of hit, and the Nefarian Trinket will provide hit all the time as well, and Zephyrian one is gonna give you flat spell damage, and then a use that is I think it's a 1.5 minutes, no 2 minutes cooldown, sorry. So you definitely, there's a lot of items you can bring from Classic into TBC, and that you will actually most likely use all the way till you hit 70, and even when you start clearing raids as well.
So if it was fresh though, what would be the things people would be gunning? So let's stick specifically with trinkets. What trinkets are people going to be gunning for early on? Because obviously I know what I would be, but get your guys' opinions.
That'd be Taroka, Tablet of Vim, and Starkiller's Bauble, because the tablet provides 22 spell hit, and Starkiller's Bauble provides 26 spell hits. So those two stacked together give you a really good boost to your spell hit chance, which is really essential when you're jumping into raids for the first time.
Apparently,
Where do they come from, Meta? Sorry, testing you on the off the top of your head.
So, Tablet of Vim, we did that together recently, didn't we? It's just a
Torghast,
quest to kill this bird in Taroka Forest. Pretty straightforward. And then Starkiller's Bauble. It's a bit of a weird one actually. There's an elite in Neverstorm. He's like a big ball of jelly. You know the ones that are like big balls of jelly that don't have a.
I love big balls and jelly. So.
Or aberrations or whatever they're called. It's like a big one of those, and it's an elite. It's actually pretty difficult to kill. You probably need to bring 2 other people with you. But when you kill it, it provides like a pickup quest, and you just click the item and turn in the quest, and that's it. That's all you have to do.
That's
really got a fat spell power trinket.
Do you know what? I thought I knew where all the good trinkets come from while questing, but I've never even heard of that. So that's really interesting. Is there a melee equivalent trinket that you get from that quest, or is it literally only a spellcaster trinket?
I think you get. I seem to remember there being protection paladin gear actually, but I'm pretty sure all the item rewards aren't trinkets. So I'd have to double check though. I'll have a little look now.
There should be someone for melee as well, yeah.
Well, there is a melee one, so I know this is there's a melee one, not from that quest. I don't know specifically that quest, but there's one from a Neverstorm chain where it's basically like a poor man's version of the Badge of Justice trinket, basically. Slightly less attack power, static attack power, and slightly less on use.
Is that the one that looks like has the same tooltip as a Druid's Wrath?
Yes, I think it's called. Yeah. I think it's called like the Rune of Arkalos or something like that. Off the top of my head,
yeah.
I don't know.
That one's really useful because as a retribution paladin, you can, if you pop Consecrate, when you got it pop buffed, it will massively boost Consecrate's damage. But then when it's got like 1 second left, you can pop Consecration again, and Consecration will continue to benefit from the increased buff damage for the entirety of its duration. So yeah. You can basically use like the kind of tactics that Affliction Warlocks use as a rep paladin with that trinket.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Again, massively boost your DPS on Gruul.
I reckon we'll probably talk about that on the paladin one, definitely. So questing wise, so you can get a couple of decent hit trinkets. What about now when you're stepping into dungeons or even heroic dungeons? Like, is there anything? I mean, you guys have been doing a lot of talking about the gear. So I mean, me personally, if I was any caster, I'd really have my eyes set on getting Quagmiran's Eye as early as possible, just because you get so little haste from anywhere else. Even if crit's more powerful, like 320 haste is obviously massive, and the more shadow bolts you can pump out, obviously the better. Is there any other, like, do you agree? Like, would you be after Quag's Eye? Like, obviously, Fake QT, you're going to be playing a mage, so a caster. Are you going to be after that straight away?
What I usually do when I'm rushing to get Karasan's servers first or something like that, what you can do is when you level all the way up to 70, you simply farm. From 60 to 62, you do Ramparts or Bia, and you farm Honorhold, Realm, Reputation till you hit Honored, and then you continue with like other dungeons or quests. And then at 68, you start doing Shattered Hall's spell cleaving runs. And if you do that all the way up to 70, you can almost be exalted with Thrallmaw or Honorhold, and that's gonna give you probably the best the spellcaster weapon you can get until you get to Karasan. This is like an epic weapon, and you need to be exalted for that one. That's what I mainly focus on. And at the same time, it's really important that you pick Scryers, and when you pick Scryers, you can get the hit trinket, and it has like 1.5 minutes cooldown as well, and then you can pop a huge spell power boost. And if you go for Exalted with Scryers, you also get a epic hit ring, I think it is, with a lot of stamina as well. So really good for Warlocks. So like what I usually would do if I was going to play a Warlock would be to farm Shattered Halls, get Exalted, and then buy a lot of arcane tomes and get the trinket and the epic ring.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there any specific gear like that meta? Have you got any sort of strategy that in a classic TBC you'll be going for? You know, like reputation wise or dungeon wise or whatever, that you'll be sort of focusing solely on straight away.
Well, one of the things I'll try and get as quick as possible is do a Terror on Gorefiend questline with my friends, because you get a really good helmet piece with 3 gem sockets called Evoker's Helmet of Second Sight, so that's really good for casters. And apart from that, a good early reward you can get before you get the one that QT mentioned from Honor Hold Fralmar is the Continuum Blade, which is like a cheaper version of it. You can get that really easily if you just do your Karazhan attunement, because by the time you've done your Karazhan attunement, you probably will be very close to Reverdive and you can just buy it. And then on the way, you may also get Starheart Lamp, which is a spell hit offhand item, which is really useful. And then, apart from that, from the top of my head, we've also got Mantle of Three Terrors and Robe of a Crimson Order. Robe of a Crimson Order you can just buy off the auction house. I think it's pretty sure it's a well drop. It's not normally that expensive, but it provides like 50 spell power and 30 spell hit rating, which is pretty essential. Then apart from that, all I can think of is Halloween awards. If depending on when Classic TBC actually comes out, it might be kind of close to that kind of time. Maybe worth doing the Halloween rewards. You can get a really fat spell powered ring called the Horseman's Signet Ring.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. Didn't even think about world events.
Scotty, I have one question though, because we talk about what if it's not gonna be like progressive but fresh. But do you think if we're gonna get a fresh server, people would actually still go into next? Because I could see people do that. Like the moment it rushes to 70, if content like raids is locked for some time, or people don't have good enough gear, would they actually try to do next and get a bit of gear, and even AQ and BWL?
I mean, yeah, it's a bloody good question, and it's obviously not one that I can answer factually, because I'm sure there will be. I mean, I know of guilds on private servers that still go back and do Molten Core every week, to get bindings and get Thunder Fury for an off tank to be, maintaining the debuff. There's certain things that will still be useful. I'm not confident enough to say yes or no. My gut feeling is no. Because I think there's better places to focus your efforts. I think like the time that you'd spend going through and doing Nax, you could have been working on a reputation in TBC that's going to yield more benefits for you. I personally wouldn't. Whether people do or not, I don't know. I've looked a lot, so I've seen people do guides. I mean, even you guys, I'm pretty sure have done things similar on YouTube, with like items that you should get in Classic, ready for TBC and stuff like that, and those big ticket items that are good early on in TBC. They may be good early on, but you can actually replace all of them in pre-bis. There's not that many, if any, items that I've looked at where it's like, well, actually, no, there is nothing better than it, from a TBC reward. So it's not where I would focus my efforts, and I don't think the majority of people would. Because let's say you was going to take 20 people into Nax at level 70. You might as well have 2 10-man Karazhan teams. And now let's say Karazhan's already been done. You might as well have 4 teams doing heroics, because the heroic rewards are still, in a 2.4.3 itemization, the heroic rewards are still going to be better than anything you can get in Nax.
Yeah, but I think people sometimes forget that if you go and clear Zephyria and then next, you can get that the showdown chance. And they're like almost as powerful as if you're exalted with Eldor or Squires for those showdown chants. So I could see, and even the trinkets in there are really good, and the weapons. So, and as you mentioned, if people are safe for Karazhan and heroics and have done their professions and stuff like that, what would they do? I mean, they could actually go back and clear the stuff for Thunder Fury and stuff like that.
I think it's a really, really good thought, and as I say, I don't doubt that some people would do it. And like you've said, with shoulder enchants, with the weapons from KT and stuff like that, they are still extremely powerful, to the point where like the healing weapon from KT is pretty much on par with the epic from Heroic Murmur in Shadow Labs. It might even be a tad better, to be fair, even with 2.4.3 itemization. So it probably is a good thing to do. You know, whether you would get people wanting to go back to actually do it, I don't know. But
I think mainly
could be a
the
good
set
tactic.
bonuses are really useful. That's the main reason why people may consider doing it. Because like the 6-piece bonus for Warlocks massively reduces threat of all the damage you deal, which could be extremely useful. It may push their DPS, but they may be able to push their DPS much further because they don't have to worry about threat as much.
I think ultimately what it would come down to, I mean, it would be actually a really good topic for us to look at as a group. Maybe not on a podcast, but us three taking it offline and really just spitballing it, maybe even for a video with all of us in, you know, looking at what would be the benefit. So looking at a loot table. So you've got to think, yeah, okay, like the KT weapons, you know, how many of those KT weapons are actually useful? Because you might go through and do a full Nax clear at level 70 and not a single item drops that's any use, you know, or you might go in, yeah, if you've got a particular boss that drops 5 or 6 items that's useful for multiple people in the raid, then it could be worth it. But I think if you're going back and you're clearing all of that just in the hopes of, you know, one particular trinket drop in or one particular weapon drop in, then I'd probably say its value starts diminishing. But it would be really interesting to have a proper dive into that and really compare these items, you know, outside of 25-man raids, because, you know, in 25-man raids in TBC, the items are always going to be better, but, you know, versus Nax. But outside of that, yeah, it would be interesting to get an idea of what sort of value it would actually bring. So really good point, Cutie, to be fair. Really, really good point. So, I mean, that, to be fair, it's been about an hour and a half, and I'd say that pretty much wraps it up. There's another trinket. So the trinket from Alcatraz, I would mention from the last boss in Alcatraz, the crit and chance on crit increasing spell damage by like 225, something like that. I'd imagine that's quite strong to get early on. Again, I'm comparing the gear for a Warlock to a Boomkin. Obviously, I've been, you know, playing a Boomkin recently, and I know the stat priorities are very, very similar. So that's another good thing to get early. And meta, obviously, you mentioned several items to do with Keepers of Time. So I think early on you can expect to see lots and lots of BM groups, because you're going to have melee wanting to go in there and get their hourglass. You know, you're going to have casters wanting, and not just Warlocks, but all casters wanting the Mantle of Free Terrors, because, you know, a lot of hit, a lot of spell power. There's the Biss sword from the last boss as well, you know, for rogues. Although you won't see many rogues, because if they watch our content, they're probably all maybe quit and gone and played Elder Scrolls Online or something, I'm not sure. But but overall, I mean, I think we've gave a good insight into what a TBC Warlock is. You know, even though, you know, obviously meta, you're the only one out of the three of us that plays a Warlock. But, you know, we've all got a deep understanding of class balance in TBC from numerous private servers. Obviously, Fake QT is pretty much one of the bigger, if not biggest, sort of private server streamers. You know, always got lots and lots and lots of people listening to his sexy voice. But just while we just carry on talking a little bit more in chat, if you've got any questions, obviously feel free to fire some questions out. As long as it's predominantly Warlock related. If it's TBC related, you know, that's fine. We'll try and answer them as well. But, you know, it would be nice if it sort of did revolve around Warlocks, while we just have some closing thoughts. So by closing thoughts, I mean, let's rank this Warlock. I want to do this at the end of each class, like class podcast. So we're on a standard gaming tier list, you know, from S through to D. For PvE, where do you think they stand? And for PvP, where do you think they stand? So QT, you can go first.
Yeah, as mentioned in chat, yeah, it seems like S tier, and I would actually vote the same, even in PvP. Like, for both things, S tier. Like, I can't imagine when I'm going to play a mage that I would not bring a Warlock when I have to farm dungeons, because Seed of Corruption together with like a mage spec into Blizzard is simply too OP. And if you compare it to like a melee group, I think you can clear dungeons probably twice as fast when you play like Warlock and mage together. So definitely something I'll be playing together with.
Cool. And meta, trying to not be too biased on the basis you play one? What do you think?
No, it's definitely S tier across the board.
Yeah, obviously I would agree. So, have we So we have had a question. So from Classic Kronos, what class pairs with Warlock are good in arenas? So we'll all answer that individually and see if we actually agree. So I'll go last. Meta in an arena with a Warlock, what would you have?
I'm not an expert, but I know that some people play Shadow play, which is obviously Shadow Priest and Warlock, for the obvious damage buffs that they provide each other. That's literally all I know.
No, that's fair enough. Fake QT, if you was playing a Warlock, what would you want your partner to be?
There's a lot of options. You could even play with another Warlock, I would say. It's in threes, if you're gonna play with like a healer and another Warlock. That could work out. If we talk about twos, Rogue, definitely. Because he can sap and you can like dot the target and he can sap the other target. On the other hand, you could play with a Druid as a healer. That's really good. You have all the HUDs, so if the healer gets CC'd or you get CC'd, like there's still HUDs that can save both of you. Shadow Priest, you have like both of your dots now, and he has his silence, and you have your silence if you play with a Fell Hunter. Let's say what else? Warrior and Warlock doesn't work. I wouldn't say. Retro Paladin, maybe Holy Paladin and a Lock could work as well. But like I would say for a healer I'd probably choose a Druid because you don't overlap your CC. Like if you play with a Disc Priest, for example, if you fear and you fear, you overlap, then all of a sudden there's not going to be a great CC. But if you play with like a Druid, he can Cyclone, he can root the warriors, you can fear, like you can do a huge CC, so that I could see becoming a really good thing. While like the Paladin, if you play with a Holy Paladin, he can Hutch, and then you can fear and Death Coil. So definitely playing with a healer, I would still go with Druid. Playing with a DPS, I would probably play with a Rogue.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just before, I'm gonna give you the answer on what I think personally. If I was a Warlock, what I would want playing with me. But a guy did ask in chat, when's the priest talk? So while I give you my brief opinion on your question, Kronos, in terms of PvP, I've put a poll on screen for what class we should be doing next week, and this will give us a good idea on what we need to go and research, what we need to be playing, what we need to be focusing on. So I'm going to let you guys decide. Obviously Druid is 1, Priest 2, Mage 3, Warrior 4, go from top to bottom on the left hand side and just put in whatever you think, but don't put any, try and put emojis afterwards, Arcax, or it won't work. So yeah, put your numbers, and whatever wins, that's what we'll do next week. But in terms of PvP for a Warlock, I'll go from two perspectives here. So if I was a Warlock, I would want a Druid with me, a Resto Druid, and that is for all the points that Fake QT already mentioned. Now, a big thing in PvP, in TBC, well, arenas particularly, is obviously Diminishing Returns. So you don't want a rogue and a paladin where stun is it's going to be on Diminishing Returns. If you put a Warlock who's got fear, death coil, then you've got the Druid who can cyclone, he can feral charge, stun. You've got all the more bigger CC chains that you can put together, the better time you're going to have, obviously, because you can lock that healer out for 10-15 seconds at a time, which the Warlock's going to be putting so much pressure on, which you also can obviously multi-dot both, so you can have the the Warlock multi-dot in both, and then still do your chain CCs, hope that fear don't break, because you would just hope that fear don't break, but the stun from the Druid's not going to break. If you feral charge and silence, it's not going to break, but you've now got all of this time where the healer's almost taken out of the fight and can't heal, but both targets are still taking damage. So if I was a Warlock, I'd want a Resto Druid with me. If I was a Resto Druid, I'd want a Warlock with me. To me, it's just God mode comp. It's just I in twos, I can't think of a better combination that I would want to play. To the point where I think me and Meta need to stream this, and we need to do some twos just for a laugh. Him on his Warlock as SOSL, and I'll spec my Druid Resto. it'll probably be embarrassing and we'll both die, but it'll be fun to see. If it's that overpowered, even two guys like me and him will be able to win the odd fight. So,
Sounds good.
yeah, I think we should give it a go. It'll be fun, if nothing else. But yeah, that answers that question. And as I say, it's been a really good episode. Obviously, yeah, fake QT meta as always. I love chatting to you guys about anything relating to TBC. So I do look forward to next week. And next week, I reckon I should probably rest up on the Saturday because I think my vocal cords are going to take a bit of a battering on the basis that the poll has chosen Druid. So next week's episode is going to be Druid. I am going to get a special guest on for next week as well. He doesn't know yet, but if he is watching now, let me just check. He isn't watching now, but he will be on here next week, whether he likes it or not. And he's a very, very exceptional feral tank in TBC. He's tanked everything in Classic TBC, plays multiple druids. You know, he knows his stuff. I'm not going to spoil it. You'll have to come back next week and find out who it is. But as I say, there'll be the four of us. So yeah, fake QT, Meta, thanks both of you. Obviously, it's been amazing as always, and obviously everyone in chat who's been vocal and putting your points across and voting on the poll and stuff like that. Obviously, thank you guys as well. I hope you come back next week.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah, for sure.
Peace out, guys.
See ya.
Bye.